What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Quality Time. And today we have our guest, Juan Fallas, a student pastor at Real Life Church up here in Valencia, California. He's a reason why I got involved in church, and he's definitely a reason I wanted to get more involved in my faith journey, having a guy like him who is guiding the students in the young adult ministry that we have. So once again, this is my guest, Juan. Juan, what's up? How you doing?
What's up, dude? We're excited. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here, Daryl. We get some good combos over coffee, so it's about time we had a good one to show people.
Like I said, we're just going to relax. We're going to pretty much have one of those coffee-esque conversations here in this space. And there's something troubling I wanted to ask you because it goes back for a while, and I just want to make sure we get clear on this. I kind of wanted to know what bet that you lost to make you become a Saints fan. Like, I know that that wasn't voluntary to become a Saints fan. So I just wanted to kind of ask you, what bet did you lose to make you have to be a part of that kind of shift in the NFL atmosphere?
I need you to know that just for you, I wore my number 9 Drew Brees t-shirt and my most trusty Saints hat that I own. And I just think it's funny that somebody that played for the most miserable franchise in the NFL, that is cursed and is just used to losing, has so much to say about the franchise that constantly owns them in the division. My mom is from New Orleans, and so I grew up watching Saints football, fell in love with it, and so I like the Cardinals growing up in Arizona too, and then watching Chiefs games the 8-10 years I spent in the Midwest. But black and gold till I die, baby, even if it means having to put up with people like you who I love desperately and I pray for your redemption and salvation.
I'm gonna let you know this. The Falcons are having a rough time. I tell people that I don't know what Arthur Blank did something to a woman in New Orleans at some point in time. She put a voodoo
Mm-hmm.
spell on him because everything was going fine in that Super Bowl until he came down from that owner's box and got on the field when he thought they were going to win. And ever since then, it was just totally downhill. Um, Outside of that, man, there's no love lost between Falcons fans and Saints fans. We'll go to war for it. We can both be 0 and whatever for the year, and when it comes down to
Yep.
that game, everybody's showing up, and we need
It's
to win.
everybody's. It's our Super Bowl. I tell that to my buddy Kyle all the. He's a diehard Falcons fan. He was my roommate in college, and we didn't know until we started decorating our opposite sides of the dorm room.
Mhm.
And I hung up my Saints flag and I turned around and he was putting like a Falcons helmet on his dresser. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. But I tell him all the time that, yeah, like listen, the NFC South is trash and that's okay. We're just competing for the shiniest turd. But if it's like Falcons Saints, it's our Super Bowl.
That's one thing I will say, man. Playing for the Falcons, New Orleans was my favorite place to play. It was so loud in there. It was like a party. It was like a
Yeah.
celebration, and you guys hated us. My homeboy
Mm-hmm.
was walking from the hotel to the stadium, and he said even the bums were talking stuff to him. And so he said he was a little uneasy walking to the stadium. And I was like, the bums were, he was like, bro, the bums were talking trash to me. I said, okay, this city's about that life. So
That's right.
never,
That's right.
so he knows what to do when he's walking to and from games. And so when we talk about football, so is Drew Brees your favorite Saints player of all time?
I think it's easy to, as a Saints fan, to swing over to Breeze and say that he's your favorite Saints player. But I would have to say yes, Drew. If we're talking like modern day, like post Drew Brees era, it's hard not to go with Alvin Kamara or Marshawn Lattimore. But if we're talking like back then, it's Breeze. But man, Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham was the first like Saints jersey that I actually like purchased. My mom bought it for me when I was a kid, and that's the one I wanted. I love Jimmy. I thought he was elite when and he was putting up crazy numbers with Drew. And then we traded him to, I believe, to Seattle for Max Unger and maybe some picks or a pick or something like that. And I remember we traded him the year or the season right after I got his jersey. And so I like to say that I have a cursed Jimmy Graham jersey because he got traded over to Seattle. But yeah, I mean, how can you not love Drew Brees? Like best free agent signing and I might be biased, but I also feel like I got some ground to stand on, like that a team has ever done. Like when San Diego was, or when the Chargers were done with him, sent him over to New Orleans. Like, I mean, that changed everything between him and Peyton and that 2010 Super Bowl. I knew you were gonna ask me about this, and I'm just reminiscing. So yeah, I'd say Drew, if not Jimmy.
No, man, that's all love. When we talk about football, we can go for days.
Yeah.
And Drew Brees was actually one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch. And that's why I'm happy we got to play against the Saints, because I got to see him up close and personal 2 times a year. Not that tall. He's in the pocket, looking up like this, trying to look over his offensive line, throwing down the middle to Lance Moore or Marcus Colston. Just, even later when you got Mike Thomas, just all
Yeah.
these weapons, and he was just such a great quarterback. So I really would say you guys won in that deal. And then when you talk about Jimmy Graham, bro, that Jimmy Graham, he was a problem for us when you played.
Yeah.
You couldn't put a linebacker on him, you couldn't put a safety on him, you couldn't put a corner on him. And I think what the downfall of Jimmy was, and not that it was his downfall, but once they tried to get him paid like a wide receiver based upon, because where he was lining up a lot of the time, you line him up, split him out in the slot, whatever. And I think he got franchise tagged, and then I think the next year he got paid. But like within those 3 years after that kind of debacle, he was gone. But that
Yeah.
was one of Drew Brees' favorite weapons, and there was absolutely no way you could stop him. So those were
No.
some pretty solid picks, man.
No, I remember against I think it was against Atlanta that Jimmy caught a touchdown and bent the goalpost when he was dunking. And ever since then, that's when they outlawed the dunking over the goalpost because it stopped the game, which I think it was in New Orleans, I can't remember if it was in New Orleans or in Atlanta, but I loved when he did that. And now you just can't have fun in the NFL anymore.
I want to say you're 100% right. And it's funny because we had Tony Gonzalez, who's one of the first people, from what I know, to literally start
Yeah.
and continue doing that dunking. That was his touchdown celebration, since he used to be a basketball player in
Yeah.
college. And so as we stay around the realm of sports, man, also something controversial, you said that baseball, you're laughing because you already know.
Yeah.
You said baseball is not a sport. Baseball is the first sport I played. So, man,
Okay.
we might be fighting by the end of this interview if you keep on keeping up, man. What's your deal with baseball?
I my hot take, I have no ground to stand on. I know this is gonna sound ridiculous, but I have told myself this take for far too long to back off now. I believe it is not a sport because I half the game when your team is batting, you're just sitting on your butt. And like nothing, a whole lot of things aren't changing. And then like even when your team is out on the field, like a lot of them are just sitting on their butt too. When I argue with my buddies that are baseball players all the time, and I am like, listen, I am a fan of athleticism. And so if you take the most athletic baseball player and then you take the most athletic NFL player, I thoroughly believe the most athletic NFL player would just run circles around the baseball player. Same thing with the NBA. Everybody loves Jokic in Denver, and I don't like him. Why? Because he's not athletic, and so I don't respect that. It's a terrible take. I know it's bad, but I'm sticking to it until the day I die.
You're gonna have people boycotting this show if you keep on coming on with all these
Oh
hot
no,
takes.
you might have to clip this.
It's gonna be probably one of the first clips I use to get some traction. But outside of that, man, baseball is so funny because I've been watching baseball a lot more the last couple of years. My girlfriend's family, they're real close with always Jack Flaherty. He pitched for the Dodgers last year. He's with the
Okay.
Detroit Tigers now. And when I watch baseball, it's just so funny. So you talk about sports, and I use this analogy a lot when I'm comparing stuff to people or just talking about percentages. If you get 3 hits out of 10 in baseball, you could potentially be a Hall of Famer. If
Crazy.
basketball,
Yeah.
you got to shoot 50% of the field, 90% from the free throw line, 40% from three. In football, as a quarterback, if you complete, 65 to 70% of your passes, that's real good. You go up to the plate and can hit the ball 3 times out of 10 in baseball, you're very, very good. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy to me, but like
Yeah.
that's how. And you talk about people sitting down while people, when I look at how these pitchers throw some nasty, nasty stuff, man. And I was like, and I played baseball in high school. We didn't have a baseball team in college. I felt like I might have been able to play. But there's a
Mhm.
point where you're just like, if you can't hit that ball, there's no way that you can play at all. So if you're one out
Yeah.
of 10 or even 2 out of 10, they're like, nah, we can't use you. But I 100% feel what you're saying on that. But baseball is a different beast. I will say that. And so shout out to all the baseball players out there. Don't listen to Juan and his hot takes that he says to you. But you also, like you said, you can see a dude that weighs, 250, pudgy, can't really run, and he'll play baseball, but he can also step up to the plate and hit.
Yeah, and that what is it? They say the reaction time to be able to hit a fastball in the MLB, it's crazy. So again, baseless claim that I have just planted my flag on for 15 years, and I just can't get off of it now. I've dug my heels in, so I'm sticking to it.
I would expect you to do that. You look like that type of person, especially being a Saints fan. You got to put your feet in the ground and stand firm on
we got
something.
we got to dig in.
And then on that note as well, so baseball, I know I've done a lot of research on baseball. You have to decide, I think it's 0.04 seconds you have to decide whether you're going to swing or not in order to
Yeah,
possibly make contact with the ball. Like that's totally insane. So
nuts,
just
man.
some knowledge out there for the people. And so before I get people to burn down my show because you're doing all these hot takes, let's talk about what you actually do.
Yeah.
What led you to become a student youth pastor on your journey in this thing we call life?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of crazy. So I've always been involved in church. I was raised Catholic. So I remember at a very young age, my my grandma would take me to Catholic church, and we would serve with the nuns and everything, like help hand out food and cook meals and whatever. And then fast forward, we started going to a Christian church, and I just always remember being in church. And then, fast forward that to junior high, high school, growing up in Chandler, Arizona. The church was just always open to me. And so I was your stereotypical church kid that if the doors were open, if there was an event happening, man, I was there. I never missed church. I had a really, really good relationship with my student pastor, Paul. And I like to say Paul's the reason I became a student pastor. I actually wanted to be a cardiologist. I had a full ride to Arizona State in Tempe, and my major was biochemistry. And so that's what I wanted to do with my life. And I remember I went on a mission trip sometime in that year, and I actually got to teach. And I had always led like small groups and little things like that at church, but I'd never gotten to teach. And so I got to do that. And so when I came back, I was like, man, that was really fun and fulfilling. And, I really enjoyed it. And so I remember calling Paul, and I was like, hey, do you think I could do what you do? And he was like, yeah, I think you'd be great at it. And so that's kind of what made the switch for me to go into ministry. I My dad wasn't in the picture growing up, and so it was just my mom and I'm an only child. And my mom is an amazing woman. She worked 4 jobs. She'd be up at 6 a.m. and she'd head out to tutor. And then after tutoring, she'd teach fourth grade all day. And then after teaching fourth grade, she'd go tutor more in the afternoon. And I'm almost 100% sure there was a season there in my growing up years where she was going to houses after tutoring in the afternoon and scrubbing toilets and cleaning just to make ends meet, and to provide for me. If you asked me as a kid if I knew how like tight on money we were, I could have never told you that, because my mom was so good about providing and keeping it all to herself, because she didn't want me to ever want. But in that aspect, I spent a lot of time by myself, and so I started spending a lot of time with Paul. And so Paul poured into me. He loved on me every time. There were 3 major times that I did some dumb stuff while my mom was out of town, and I never called my mom first. I always called Paul. To this day, if you ask my mom why I'm still breathing, it's probably because of Paul Ortiz at Chandler Christian Church. He's now at a church in Tulsa, but he's a big reason why I chose student ministry.
Man, when we talk about the influences that a positive male figure can have on us, and I don't think we highlight that enough and know how valuable enough that is for us. You have
Yeah.
somebody who came into your life who ends up being, a father figure for you, but a very influential figure. And you call this dude before you even call your mom when you get into a
Yep.
little bit of trouble, as a lot of us have been in at one point in time in life. But that is an invaluable piece to have in your life, especially when you're missing something like that. And so
Yeah.
now you get to be that impact for a lot of students in and around the area, some student athletes, some just going to school. What makes it so worth it for you being able to work with students in a faith-based aspect, in the same instance that you got it from Paul?
Yeah. Man, the statistics, just to backtrack a second, what you mentioned, having a positive male influence in your life, the statistics when kids just have a dad, and obviously I'm not trying to be anybody's dad other than my own kids, but the statistics when they have a positive male influence in the household or in their life, just the less likelihood that they're gonna end up in prison, that they're gonna struggle through poverty, that they're gonna struggle with drugs and all this other stuff. And Paul did that for me. And so I wanted to do that for other kids, because if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I'd be. My mom did an amazing job, but there was a role there that Paul filled for me, that I like to attribute a lot of who I am because of him stepping up. And so now I get to do that for our students if they need it. And it is so rewarding to me witnessing students not struggle, but like, I don't know, work through their faith questions and their doubts and their questioning of if God is real. Because I feel like when you're a teenager, and especially with the students I get to work with, which is mostly high schoolers and then some a little bit on the middle school side as well, they're at such a pivotal moment in their lives where they're making big decisions. They're no longer, they're a little too old to feel like they want to stay under mom and dad's wing. And it's like, well, it's
Mhm.
mom and dad's faith or mom and dad's decision. And they're starting to enter this age of like, you actually kind of get to make your own choice about what you believe. Like mom and dad might still drag you to church, but you start developing the ability to decide, like, do I want to believe this or do I not? And so helping them process these questions that they're having and then showing them the way that God is actually showing up in their lives, and they might be missing it, or bringing clarity to issues or struggles that they're going through. Why is this happening to me? And maybe pointing back to the idea that, like, man, I don't know why it's happening to you right now, but let me share with you a piece of my story of when I went through hardship, and let me show you how God redeemed that hardship a year later, 2 years later, 10 years later. And painting a whole picture for them, because again, when you're a teenager, you're so focused on exactly what's ahead of you, and you don't actually, for a lot of times, like, I wasn't thinking about what was 10 years ahead of me. Like,
Mhm.
why am I going through this thing right here? I had no idea that it would serve me years down the line. And getting them to realize that God is doing something really cool in their lives that they may not notice right now. And then when that light bulb moment happens, when it finally clicks and they realize, man, life is better lived with Jesus than I've been trying to do it myself. I've been trying to fill this God-sized hole in my heart with, man, drugs and alcohol and relationships and loneliness and stuff and consumerism and all this other stuff. I've been trying to fill, and everything leaves me empty. And then when they've realized that, like, if they would just walk and run to Jesus, that life becomes better, and it becomes easy, not easier, but just it's easier to walk through those hard periods. When that light goes on, you just can't beat that moment in student ministry, man.
Juan is so just humble in how he moves. I tell him I appreciate him a lot because the space that we have at real life, I try to tell our students all the time. I'm like, yo, like we didn't have this when I was growing up. We were in regular church listening to possibly boring sermons, but they weren't preaching especially to us for the things that we're having to tackle in our age group. And you brought up a really good thing, like the at the point of J high in high school where you have students and young people that are kind of separating from their parents. They've heard clean your room. They've heard all this stuff over and over, and they kind of know everything and think they know
Yeah.
everything. But they're also just looking for someone else to hear them, someone else to
Hmm.
not necessarily tell them, hey, do this, do that, but somebody to listen to them, give them sound advice, somebody that's there for when they bring stuff to, even if it's just to listen sometimes.
Yeah.
But Juan is real, very, very good actually, because he's sitting there and we get to do a lot of interesting stuff with him. But before church service, you're sitting there playing Mario Kart and just having fun on the machine, on the video games that we have, or they're outside shooting hoops or playing ping pong and things of that nature. What's probably your favorite thing to do, or what's probably your favorite part about working with the youth?
I think it's just doing life with them, man, because the thing I'm pretty sure I tell this to all of our leaders, so I'm sure I've told you this at some point through our meetings. Kids, they're so good at smelling lies and fakeness and just BS from a mile away, especially from adults, because they get it everywhere. There's adults that are like, a lot of adults in their lives are paid to be in their lives, right? Like, and not a bad thing, but like they have to be there. So it's whether it's their teachers or coaches or whatever. Um, and so when you have an adult that actually wants to spend time with you as a teenager. And I remember this as growing up without a dad. Like a lot of my small group leaders, like they weren't, I don't pay you to be here on Sundays and to hang out with ninth grade boys, but you choose to do it. And when an adult would choose to spend time with me, it was so life-giving, not because I wasn't getting the attention I needed at home and my mom was absent, and like my mom loved me and she did an amazing job, but just because I was seeking like that affirmation from a grown up that was male because my dad wasn't there. And so when I had that, that was huge for me. And so I tell our leaders all the time, as far as kids go, like, dude, you got to build relationships with them. And the only way you're going to build relationships with them is by doing life with them. Because I could teach the best sermon, message, whatever you want to call it, on stage that has ever been taught, preached in the history of the world, and chances are those kids, at the moment their feet hit the parking lot, they'll forget it. And by the time they're 20, they won't remember it anymore. But what they will remember is they're going to remember the conversations that they had with their small group leader in small groups about a really heavy thing, or that their small group leader showed up to their football game or to their orchestra recital or played video games with them or stayed up way too late with them at church camp. Those are the bread and butter of student ministry. And that's the life-giving part. The administrative things that we have to do to run a student ministry, you got to do them. It is what it is. But the part that the part of my job that I would do for free is hanging out with students and just doing life with them, because that's what they need. They don't need another person that's forced to be in their life. They need a person that wants to be in their life, and investing in them and developing relationships with them, so that when the time comes that they need help, they know where to turn, that it's a positive outlet and not one of the many negative outlets that we are all presented because of the world that we live in.
I like what you said there. You said when they run into stuff in life, when they need help, because it's going to happen. And you
Mm-hmm.
just hope you build that relationship and that rapport with them, that they trust you enough to approach you with something or to have a question about something and be vulnerable about something. You had this, we're filming this, and you had this very good message that you had on Palm Sunday as we go into Easter. It's a very, very good message. You got a little bit emotional up there, which you should, because it's a very pivotal and a very important message. And I think now, we see this influx, and not being a black African American male, I've dealt with this. Sometimes black families, we go to church, but like we go to church on the holidays, on the
Yeah.
Easter, put on the clothes, get draped up and dripped out. We come on Christmas, we come on the major things like a
Yeah.
lot of people do. And you know
Yeah.
what I mean? As long as you're getting in there, sometimes it's good. But sometimes a lot of people have problems finding a church home or
Mm.
going consistently. We have so many different avenues now where you can just watch online, be in your pajamas, be in the bed. You can still get the word, which is good. But
Yeah.
there's nothing like coming to church and building a church family and seeing people that you see every week that are about Jesus. And one of your favorite sayings that you say that I really love is know who you are and know whose you are, which I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love that. What advice would you give people that are searching for a church home or a church to be a part of, or still just walking on that faith journey?
Man, the first thing I tell people is you need to get proper expectations. I think a lot of the times, maybe people come from all different backgrounds, right? Some people come and they've never been to church. Some people are your Easter, Christmas people, and they are like, well, maybe I need to get plugged in more. And so they want to come around. Some people were hurt by the church years ago, and they're maybe starting to think about joining a church again. I always tell people you have to have proper expectations, and you need to realize that every single person that works at a church, that serves at a church, that has ever set foot inside of a church and will ever set foot inside of a church is a broken human being in need of Jesus as much as you are. And so, like I try and be probably transparent, maybe sometimes to a fault, with our students, where I tell them about my struggles with, being a knucklehead as a teenager, and and partying, and then going to church and doing things I shouldn't have been doing, and all this other stuff, and even my struggles as an adult and through my young adult years, and struggles with pornography, struggles with lust and other vices, not because I want to glamorize them, but because I want them to understand that just because I have a platform and just because I get to, teach the word, it doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I'm far from it. Every single one of us is constantly being sanctified and made more like Jesus every step of the way. And so when people show up to church for the first time, sometimes I think they have this false view of Christians, which honestly, it's probably because of social media and the way that some Christians portray themselves. They have this false view that, like, well, you have to have it all together and all these people have it all together, so I'm going to show up and I'm going to look like a mess. And the reality is, like, nah, like, we are all so broken and so in need, and we're all looking to fill that hole in our hearts, and we all choose the wrong things to fill that hole in our hearts with. And so when people show up to a church, I want to tell them, like, man, just show up understanding that even the people that get paid to be here are broken and in need of Jesus as much as you are. And then at some point, maybe not right when you walk in, but at some point, if you keep showing up and you find a place that you connect with, at some point you got to jump in. At some point, you got to become part of what's going on in there, because the true way to get plugged into a church, in my opinion, is through community. We were designed to do life together. We weren't designed to do life alone. God didn't design us that way. God made us to be together. And so if you just show up to church and then, like, the moment the message is over, you're like bolting for the car so you can move on with the rest of your day, or you're just watching church online and you never like actually gather with people, and then you're like, nah, you know what, I'm just not connecting. It's like, well, you're not doing the work to connect. Because when you connect with people and you hang out after service and you chop it up with people, or you serve in one of the teams or something like that, get plugged in some way, shape, or form, a small group. If you don't want to serve and you want to just be around people, get plugged in with a small group. Then, and you start doing life with people that are like-minded, man, that's where I think you see Jesus the most, is because you see the brokenness in other people. It disarms you to share your brokenness with them as well. And then you realize, oh man, we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to figure life out together. Why don't we go about life's highs and lows together, chasing Jesus together? And it's just so much sweeter that way. So when you find a church that values that and values community and not individualism, I think you have a really good spot there, and a good place to start.
Mm. We aren't meant to do life alone. That is one of the most powerful things you've always said, and we always sit up there because we're talking to young adults, and I know you have way more experience in the faith-based setting with the young adults. But with phones, with social media, with depression, with anxiety, a lot of those
Yep.
things we deal with on our own. But you said it, like when you find a church home that you find yourself showing up early, you find yourself sticking around a little bit later rather than jetting right out of there. And I feel like our church does a great job. We got donuts, probably I grab a little one too many every now and then. But we have all these spaces, and the churches actually we're building more space to be more I don't even know what the word is, to just to be able to house more stuff about
Yeah.
after church, before church, more just specific areas for people to congregate, to talk, to
Hmm.
connect. I guess you could say more places to connect. And I think that's what makes a very good church. Like you said, a lot of guys, and you told me this a long time ago, you said our students don't show up to hear my message, to come to hear what
Hmm.
Juan says. They show up to small groups to be around Drew, or to talk to Drew, or just things like that. And so you put it in very good perspective. And I just like what you said about finding a church home. And there are a lot of broken people in church. And that's where we come to be one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where we come to get our cup filled. That's where we come to get the word and figure out how to power through this next week. And so I really like what you said, finding a community to be a part of, somewhere that you are um, I was gonna say complacent, not complacent, but somewhere you come to be connected, somewhere you
Yeah.
come to know people around you. And I really appreciate you even just saying that, because you have a real good way with words. And when you start going, I just start listening, I'm forgetting I'm interviewing. I'm like, okay, well, all right, go ahead. But this is exactly what how valuable you are to this age group, to YX. Where you can
Thanks, man.
stand up and you can be vulnerable. Like you said, sometimes you say, I think I'm a little bit too vulnerable and share too much, but everything that you're going through, a lot of these kids are going through. And the
Yep.
way when I'm doing public speaking, I'm like, hey, I might tell this story or I might ask a question and there's one person that raises their hand and answers this question or whatever. But there's probably 5 or 10 other people in the crowd that had that same question. They were just a little
Yeah.
bit too afraid to raise their hand. And so don't be afraid to be too vulnerable because we're dealing with an age group where, it's hard for them to say or be the first one to say, hey, I'm dealing with this, I'm struggling with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate everything you do. And then
Yeah,
coming to
man.
just the end of faith and talking about faith, man, I always like to ask, what are people's favorite Bible verse or chapters in the Bible that really resonates with them or that they use on a daily, weekly, or just often
Mm.
basis?
Yeah. So one verse that's always, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it definitely one that has stuck in my brain ever since, gosh, probably like third or fourth grade. I went to a Christian school that was planted by missionaries in Costa Rica, where I was born, and so we always had memory verses for the week. And I don't remember any of the other ones, but for some reason I remember Proverbs 9:10, and it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." I don't remember what version of the Bible that is, but for some reason it always stuck to me, and so I always come back to it. And it's, fear has such a interesting connotation in our world because we think of fear as a bad thing, but the fear of the Lord that the Bible speaks about is not a fear of like a boogeyman or like something that scares us because it's bad for us, but it's more of like a reverent and respectful fear, if you will, kind of like, like I have a healthy respect and a healthy reverence for my mom. Like I'm not afraid of my mom, like she's going to hurt me or anything like that when I was a kid, but I had this respect of my mom and respect of authority. I'm not afraid of police officers, but I respect them and I have this reverence for them. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One means understanding. So it's like the difference between knowing and wisdom is knowing who God is. And so the more we get to know the heart of the Father, the more we get to know, I guess, what makes God tick in a way, which we never will know everything. But the more we get to understand how God works and how God loves us so well, and truly what Jesus' sacrifice on the cross meant for us, I believe the wiser we become, because I believe we start thinking and we start leading our lives in the direction that God would have for us. And I believe that when the way we're running aligns with what God has for us, then I mean you kind of get into this beautiful momentum going forward because you're running together with God instead of fighting him the entire time, because the Bible says he's got good plans for us, to prosper us, not to
Mhm.
hurt us. Doesn't mean life's going to be easy. That verse is all over sports locker rooms and the stadiums all over the world. And I think sometimes it's like taken out of context because people are like, oh yeah, God's plan for you is to win this game, and it's like it might not be. And it might be that you have to learn some hard things through hardship, but then those things are going to get to be redeemed at some point. And so the more we understand who God is, the better we line up with his plan. I believe the wiser we'll become.
Mm. I think it's interesting. It's funny when I ask people what their favorite Bible verse is, and they always go back to something that they learned a long time ago, and it's something that stayed with them. And as you talk about sports, one of my favorite Bible verses is iron sharpens iron, Proverbs
Mm-hmm.
27:17. And my high school coach used to say that all the time. And so in life, where you talking about building community and making sure we're not doing life alone, when you talk about sports, you want to go against the best person because
Yeah.
you want to be able to get better. And that's how it should be with faith in your journey. You want to get around other people that are also working on themselves, other people that are good with their faith, such as knowing the Bible and knowing where to point people to when they're going through certain things. And that's why I felt like, God put you in my life,
Mm.
to have somebody else who has a lot of the things that I want to get. Your husband, your dad to two beautiful boys. Talk about what it's like to be a husband and a dad from this person that used to be a knucklehead making some
Yeah.
mistakes like we all do, to this person who's a fully grown adult with some two little guys that he has to
Yeah.
guide and take to Disneyland and all that kind of stuff.
uh, oh man, I got my eyes are already starting to water. I love my family, bro. I I'm not a good husband most of the time, and I'm not a good dad most of the time, but it is truly a joy. and such a pleasure to get to do what I do, because a pastor, Connor, my boss, who I say he's technically my boss, but he's more my friend. Connor always tells me, like, your calling is not being a pastor. Your calling is being a dad, and your calling is being a husband. That's your first ministry, and then like student ministry, working at a church is what you do. It's not who you are, and that's hard for me to remember sometimes. But I never imagined a life where I would love being a dad so much, um, and being married to the love of my life. Like, we're going on almost 10 years now, and Mav is 3. He just turned 3, and then AJ's he just turned 4 months old. And just watching them develop, and watching Mav grow up and develop his own attitude and his own way of being and coming into who he's going to be little by little is one of the most beautiful things ever. And the way his face lights up and runs to the door when I come home, it is one of the most filling and endorphin producing things I think I've ever experienced in my life. Because, like I said, like when I was a kid, like I was so focused on what was in front of me, and I was like, yeah, maybe one day I'll be a dad, maybe one day I'll get married, but all I care about is having money so I can, like, do dumb mods to my car and spend money on taking some girl out on a date, and whatever, like just dumb things that I wasn't focused on the future. I didn't really care about the future. And even in college, I was like, yeah, someday, it'll work out. And then I met Elkie, and I remember she was kind of like at that point after we'd been dating for a while, where she was like, are you gonna marry me or are you not? Because like I'm not gonna sit around wasting time. And that's kind of where the shoe dropped in my head, where I was like, oh yeah, like, why am I dating this girl? Am I dating her because I want to marry her at some point, or am I dating her just to date, like just because I want to? And because all my buddies have girlfriends and whatever, and that's when I was like, no, like I love her, and I can't see myself doing life without her anymore. And so that's when we decided to get married. And then she was always ready to have kids. She wanted like a truckload of kids, like 15 passenger van, load them all in there, like we're good to go. And I said, absolutely not. I was like, I can't do that. I wanted only one because I was an only child. And I was like, one's great. And she was like, yeah, but don't you remember back to when you didn't have any siblings to play with, and remember how lonely you were? And I was like, okay, well, let's not relive my childhood trauma. But I was like, yeah, okay, we could do 2. And she was like, what about 3? And I was like, we'll start at 2. We'll figure it out. And so Mav came around, and it is so true what people say. It's like, you don't understand. You might not. It's hard to understand like unconditional love until you have it. Until you have a kid, because there are times when the kid is just pushing my buttons, and it's been a long day, and I just want to punch a hole in a wall. And then he will do it's like last night. So we're coming back from Disney, and he's got his new Buzz Lightyear toy in the back seat, and he keeps pressing the buttons to make it beep. And his little brother, who was 4 months old, who hates the car and screams bloody murder anytime he's in the car, he's asleep. And we're driving through LA traffic. And so it's like bumper to bumper. And if the car ain't moving, AJ will wake up. And so I'm trying to keep the kid asleep by driving like 2 miles an hour in the HOV lane. And Mav keeps pushing the buttons and making sounds. And so Buzz is waking up AJ. And we told him, we said, hey, buddy, like if you can't stop playing with him this way and stop getting frustrated when you can't fold the wings and whatever, we're going to take Buzz away. And he starts wailing and screaming. So that wakes up AJ. So finally, like Elkie reached back there and she took Buzz away, and she said, you'll get him back when you're able to calm down. And he is throwing a full-blown temper tantrum. I'm like white-knuckling the steering wheel because I'm so frustrated and tired from the whole day. And then we pull into our neighborhood, and we said if he could calm down by the time we got to our neighborhood, he could have Buzz back. And he did. And so we give Buzz back to him. And the sweetest, tiniest little voice, he's just 3, bro. And he just looks in his little mirror to us, and he says, I'm sorry I get angry at you. And we're like, it's okay, man. Like, we get it. And then he's like, I'm sorry I played loud with Buzz. So like he is at 3, he's already realizing what it means to take responsibility, and also like realizing what he did wrong 30 minutes ago. It didn't just like go out of his mind. And little moments like that, when you see that he is his own tiny human, are the best. Dude, I could talk about my kids for hours. I love being a dad so much. It's a joy watching how much he loves being at church. Like every Sunday, the moment his feet hit the parking lot, he doesn't stop sprinting until he gets into his classroom and he sees Miss Addie, who's his teacher, and he walks out of class when I pick him up after service, and he has like his little craft, and he tells us exactly what he learned, and he knows the Bible stories. We were watching a Jesus movie, that King of Kings, that's out in theaters right now. And in the moment when Jesus gets baptized, the camera flips up to the sky, and the doves come out of white dove comes out of heaven. And before anything was said in the movie, he stood up in his seat in the movie theater and he yells, "The Holy Spirit." And so the kid knows, like, the dove is the Holy Spirit descending on Jesus. And little things like that, I'm like, it is so rewarding to have a kid. And so many times they frustrate me, and my patience wears thin, and I have a short fuse as it is, and it's my cross to bear and what I'm trying to work on myself. But then so quickly everything turns around, and then you see the way God sees us as like this knucklehead that doesn't get it, and he's like, and I show you grace upon grace upon grace, and every time you fall down, I'm there to pick you up. And then I look at my son, I'm like, Mavi, like, why can't you listen to me? And then I can just picture God looking at me, and it's like, why do you keep choosing to do things your way when I'm showing you a better way? And so it's just a beautiful picture of our relationship with our Heavenly Father that we get to do now, that we get to do now with our sons. My wife is salt of the earth, best woman in the whole wide world. She stays home with them full time. And I had to do 2 days, 2 full 24-hour days with Mav when she was in the hospital, after giving birth to Apollo. And just so much respect for stay-at-home moms. So I was like, I don't know how you do it. Like, there should be a special medal for putting up with a toddler for 24 hours. I was not meant to be a stay-at-home dad, so I'm very grateful for Elkie, and for the way that she leads our family so well, with grace, and the way she's raising our boys. Mav is the fantastic 3-year-old that he is because of God's grace and because of my wife's raising him while I'm at work. And so, man, God's just good to me with my family. If you want me to talk more, I can, but I'll leave you at that.
No, I appreciate you sharing, like always, man. Appreciate you sharing. Appreciate you being vulnerable. You said something. Shout out to Elkie. Shout out to Bav. Shout out to AJ. You said something in the beginning. You said, I'm probably not, the best husband or the best father, but the thing that I want to tell you is I just been watching you from afar, and you're doing a great job, man. You're doing a great job. I'm pretty sure you have some lofty and high expectations of what that looks like. I'm pretty sure you mess up just like we all mess up in life. But one thing I was going to tell you is, they have their dad present in their life. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Something that you missed out on. And so you're already doing a lot better than what you were given. And,
Yeah.
I know your mom did a great job getting you everything that she could. You actually made my eyes water up. I'm glad I wasn't on camera. But you made my eyes water up too, just how you began to load up to talk about your family, to talk about the experiences that you guys have had and been through and what you guys have weathered. And then also just I take my hat off to you, because anybody going to Disneyland with 2 kids at such a young age, because like we were talking about before, I cannot do the Disneyland. I'll do it for
Uh-oh.
my girlfriend every now and then. But you're doing a great job, man, and you're making a lot of impact in a lot of lives. And like you said, you're being a student pastor is not what you're meant to do. You're meant to be a husband. You're meant to be a father. But you're doing everything at a very, very high level, man. And I just want to give you love on that, and
I
reiterate that.
appreciate you, Drew. Man, that's all I want. Is I want Connor says this all the time. He said, at the end of your life, the only people that will remember that you worked overtime is your family. Your job won't remember it. Nobody will remember it except for your kids. And I just want that for my boys, man. I want them to love Jesus more because of me, not love him less in spite of me, and think that like church or whatever took me away from them. I want them to just have dad around. Because yeah, man, I didn't have that, and I'm still dealing with a lot of that. That's all I want for them, is to know that their dad loves them and cares about them, and it will always point them to Jesus, because Jesus saved me, and I believe Jesus can save them. Yeah, it's a pleasure, bro.
Thank you, man. Like I said, don't be afraid to shed them tears, man. Let them
Yeah.
people know them tear ducts work, man. Like you said, you're still dealing with a lot of that, man. And it's something that,
Yeah.
what I mean, I didn't have to experience that, so I can't talk about it personally, but being able to have somebody there for you means a lot. And
Yeah.
so we'll talk about that later. We'll,
Yeah.
but outside of that, outside of being a student pastor, you do some other stuff. You don't just sit here and go to church and that's it and go home and be a dad. You have some hobbies you like to do in between that. One is running, and you told me
Yep.
how much you run and how far you run, and I'm like, yeah, that's gonna be a no for me, dog. And then you also do some hybrid weight training, man.
Yeah.
What got you started into those two things?
Uh, Surprisingly, I hated working out growing up. So I was a tennis player through high school. And so I remember like I loved playing tennis, but anytime coach would have us do weights or meet on the track for conditioning, or even run, we used to run like a 1 mile warm up. That was our warm up before practice. And like hindsight, I'm like, dude, who warms up running a mile? But and granted, this is in Arizona too, so it was like 110 degrees outside when we would be playing and everything. But as soon as I graduated high school, I just stopped. I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I played a little bit of racquetball while I was at Arizona State. Then when I went to Ozark to do student ministry in Missouri, I got really into ultimate frisbee and I played intramural and club. But still, it was mostly just playing a game. It wasn't actually working out. And then I think it was towards the end of my college time there at OCC. It's probably like 2014, 15. I started working out in the gym. My mom in high school, my mom was always like, "You need to get in the gym. Like it's good for you." I worked out with some of her friends, and it is what it is. But I wasn't in love with it. And I found it again at the end of college, and I fell in love with the discipline. I fell in love with just hypertrophy training. And then I swapped over to powerlifting, and so I competed in powerlifting for like 2 years, and so I did a couple comps. Love that, but I was just getting hefty. I was big. I wasn't big in a good way. I probably weighed like at my heaviest. I think I was close to 260 pounds of not muscle. I was just a big boy because in powerlifting, in life, mass moves mass, right? So if you're
Yep.
big, you can move a lot of weight, and so that's all I cared about was moving a lot of weight. And I remember I had to cut like 10 pounds to make weigh in for my meet. And I met my buddy Eric. So Eric Rutledge, he's one of the coaches at a gym back in Missouri. Love the dude. He's such a good friend. And I walked over to Eric and he ran the CrossFit side of the gym. And I was like, hey, can you help me lose 10 pounds? I was like, it doesn't have to be like, I don't need it to be slow. I actually need it to be fast. And so he taught me how to do intervals on the air bike, made weight. I think I placed first in that meet. So I was super excited about that. But then after that, like something settled in my head where I told myself, dude, you're super strong, but you can't run a mile straight. Like you're going to die. You need to get in shape, actual physical shape. And so that's when I started going back to Eric and I got into CrossFit. And so I started doing CrossFit, and I've been doing CrossFit now for, oh man, 6 years that I've been coaching. So probably 8 years that I've been doing CrossFit, maybe 9. And that's what initially got me. I lost a lot of weight through that. And then I started coaching CrossFit, fell in love with the methodology. It's so easy for everybody. It's ever scalable. Doesn't matter where you're at. I got people that will probably go to regionals that I've coached that will compete at the highest level of the game. And then I've worked with people that are 70 years old, coming off of a rotator cuff surgery, and I scale it back for them, and they have a good workout as well. And so I love that aspect of it. And then when I moved to California in May, Connor was running a lot, and he was like, "Dude, we should do a marathon together." And I was like, "Dude, I hate running. I'm not running." And then I switched training programs at the gym, and on Saturdays was my track day. And I was like, dude, I hate running. I don't want to do track days. But I started going to the track, and I would run, and the cross country team was there. And it's all these,
Mm,
it's a high school track team. So it's a bunch of these high school kids that weigh 110 pounds soaking wet. And they're running, like they're doing their warm up mile, running like a 7 minute clip. I'm like, dude, like they're so fast. And here I am, this like big dude, and I can't run fast. And so I'm very competitive and I like challenging myself. And so I picked up running. And so now I do CrossFit, hybrid style training. 4 days a week, and then I run 3 days a week. So I do Tuesdays, like my speed work day, Thursdays, my zone 2 day, so slow stuff. And then Saturday is my long run day. So 6 miles and over on Saturdays. But I have found a new love for it because it's so calming to me. Like throw a podcast in, throw an
Hmm.
audiobook, throw a album on, and I can just go and control my breathing. And it is very, very calming and has done wonders for my health. So tell people all the time, if you hate running, just start doing it and it gets easier. You don't have to run fast, just run.
I think that's so funny because I remember when you were saying, "Hey, you gonna start doing a run club at church on a Saturday? You
Mm-hmm.
should come by." I'm like, "Hey, I'm a runner a little bit. How many miles y'all doing?" "Oh, just 3 or 4." And I'm like, "That's kind of out of my range, buddy. That's just a little bit out of my range." But also, I run, and I guess you could say I'm a treadmill runner, but it also has to be the right treadmill. So I'm trying to run
Yeah.
outside more. But I can't. I got to run to music. Like if I don't have
Mm-hmm.
music, and I've not to say I've not tried it, but I guess I'm just in my head too much if I don't have music or don't
Yeah.
have headphones in general. But I definitely run to the pace of whatever I'm listening to as well.
Yeah. The
So if I'm
cadence.
listening
Yeah.
to it, yeah. So, but to hear that you can do an audiobook or a podcast or anything like that, I'm like, more love to you, big dog.
Dude, I have to have something, right? There's people out there that run without headphones on, and I'm like, that person should be investigated because they're probably a sociopath. Like anybody that can just run listening to the drool coming out of their mouth and their hard breathing, that's ridiculous. Props to them.
Oh my gosh. And then last but not least, I want to talk about this because I know you're a really big fan of coffee. You love
Yeah.
Starbucks. You love how great their
Mm-mm.
coffee.
Don't get me started, Drew.
Well, then why'd you take me to Starbucks to meet them, man?
Because
You
it's
should have
close to
took me
my
some.
house and it's easy to do before I come to work.
I'm totally kidding, man. But you're a coffee aficionado. I see you on
Yeah.
Instagram in the morning doing your little thing, making your stuff.
Hmm.
How often are you drinking coffee a day? And then what brought you to your coffee, your love for coffee, your love for a
Yeah.
good cup of Joe?
I've always liked coffee since college. I think everybody loves their coffee in college. But never like specialty coffee, which is what us snobs call nicer coffee. And so yeah, I always liked coffee. I got into like hand brewing with a kettle and a brewer probably right after I moved to Denver. So this would have been like 2019-ish, 2020. And then I went over to my buddy Nick's house, who has his own roasting company now. And he introduced me to espresso. I never drank espresso before straight, and he showed me how to get. I always thought of espresso as like dark, bitter, gross, like viscous. But he showed me what like good espresso is supposed to taste like, and I fell in love with it. And so this was probably like in November. So for Christmas that December, I told my mom and Elkie, I said, I don't want you to buy me anything. I just want you to give me money to buy my own setup. Because my birthday is in February. So I told him, I said, hey, combine my birthday gift, whatever you're planning on getting me with my Christmas gift, and just give me that money so I can buy a setup, which worked out great because Maverick was born 4 months after that. And so right around the time we had our first baby and we weren't sleeping, I was at that point getting in the game pretty consistently. And yeah, I view it now as less of a way of getting caffeine in my body, and now it's part of my morning routine. It's calming. It gets me caffeine, but it's also like an art in my opinion. Like there's a way to roast beans so that they taste good. There's a way to brew beans with temperature and pressure and dosage and timing to bring out flavors and things like that. It's just fun to nerd out about it. Now, if you just want a latte, like I can do that all day long as well. But if you want to get nerdy about a shot of espresso, I say this all the time, and Elkie just rolls her eyes at me. I'm like, how can you not be romantic about coffee? Like you see that shot just pull, and you're like, just slow mo that creaminess. It's so good. As far as how much I consume caffeine wise, it got a little out of hand, and so actually I'm dealing with some heartburn from a surgery I had last year. It started around March of last year. Heartburn, indigestion, GERD, things like that. And my doctors actually tell me I need to dial back the caffeine severely. Towards the end of last year, I was probably doing like 3 coffee drinks in the morning,
Ooh.
like 2 shots of espresso, and then maybe a pour over filter brew to bring to work. Then I was taking my pre-workout before I'd go work out. Then I would probably have a Coke with lunch, maybe an afternoon latte when I get home, and then maybe a Coke with dinner. So it was really
Yo,
bad. Yeah,
that's
I know,
OD.
dude. That yeah. And so it got to the point where caffeine was not doing anything for me anymore. But then through my journey with GERD over the last 2 months, maybe, or maybe it's not GERD, maybe it's just bad indigestion or acid reflux. My doctor was like, hey, you need to dial back the coffee. So earlier this year, I had already dialed it way back. And so at this point, I was probably at 2 shots in the morning. I quit my pre workout in December because I didn't need it. And then a latte in the afternoon. And they said, dial it back. So now I am at 1 shot of espresso in the morning. And then if I do have a latte in the afternoon, I'm actually going to start using decaf for the afternoon latte, just for the love of coffee, because I know it won't give me the caffeine. But surprisingly, I don't feel like my energy levels have been affected. I've been on the
Okay.
one source of caffeine daily for 4 days now, and I'm feeling perfectly fine. And so maybe I was just taking too much, and those receptors were a little fried. And so now they're maybe they're healthy again, and caffeine is doing what it's supposed to do.
Man, thank you for practicing discipline and listening to your
Mhm.
doctor and doing the things that a lot of people don't do. Some other people be like, man, he don't know what he talking about. He ain't have my coffee. He ain't got the stuff I'm brewing.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna have
He
to
told
take
when
you.
he told me when he told me I had to come back, I almost like showed him a picture of my home setup, and I'm like, "Sir, like, what am I supposed to do with all of this if you tell me that I need to quit caffeine?"
This is
So
an investment, sir. This is
it's been
we
3 years of investment. So yeah, it's the upgrades have come. I am a serial hobbyist. And so
mm,
when I get my claws in something, if I don't give it up within 4 months, which typically I do, all my money goes into that, any extra money. So for me now, like any extra money that I make that isn't money that goes to our home budget, I have like my fun money. My wife is a saver, I'm the spender. I have my
uh-huh.
fun money that I get from coaching CrossFit that she doesn't care what I do with. So that money goes to shoes, coffee, or more CrossFit gear. Those are the three things.
So I'm gonna take you up on a cup of espresso or a cup of
Yeah,
coffee in the near future. So we'll have to sit
anytime.
down and do that and brew that. But that's what I forgot about that, and I want to get into that, man. You talk about shoes, so you talk about a person that loves some shoes. Juan over here loves some shoes.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite? What's your probably most recent favorite purchase that you've made in the last, let's say 2025, if there's
Yeah,
anything?
yeah. I would say performance wise, I just got into wearing like barefoot shoes probably about 3 weeks ago. And so I'm wearing them right now. They're called Vivo Barefoots. And so I'm wearing them currently. Oh,
I was gonna
right
tell
there.
you pull
Yeah,
it.
I got
Pull
you,
it.
bro. Right there
Okay.
with egg and bacon socks and everything, baby. Um, but if you're talking, lifestyle sneakers and Jordans and things like that, I started as a Nike guy, like most people do. So I'd say probably my favorite Nike pair I have is some Nike SBs that they did a collab with a skate shop. So they're called Crenshaws. So it's a skate shop in Crenshaw, um, which are a beautiful pair of shoes. They got like dusty colors to them, a muted tone. So they go with everything. Those were my shoes I bought when I got the job here in California. There's a sneaker shop on Melrose down in LA that's very famous on YouTube. It's called Cool Kicks. And I had watched their videos for like 2 years in Denver. And so I told Elkie, hey, if we move to California, I want to go to Cool Kicks and I want to buy a pair of shoes. And so I had this money saved up. So at probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks after we moved here, we went to Melrose and I got a pair of Crenshaws. But my favorite pair of shoes has to be New Balance. They make the New Balance 9060s, which is their newest model, and they're like weird looking shoes. All the gym people and all the fit girlies are wearing them. They're like the white ones with the cream. They have all these muted colors, but they have a special collab they did with Joe Freshgood out in New York, I believe is where he's at, and it's called the Baby Shower Pack. So they're like baby blue and like dusty pink, and they got the suede and the purple laces and everything. Dude, they're so sick. I've worn them like maybe 4 or 5 times. That's one of the only pair of shoes I have that I've paid resale for that I haven't gotten for retail. I
Okay.
try not to do resale because I think paying resale prices for shoes is kind of ridiculous. So I try
Yeah.
and stick to retail. Those I paid resale for.
Man, you talk about some nasty pairs over here, but no, you're 100% right with the resale, man. And my sister used to be a sneakerhead back when I was younger, so like I saw the Jordans before they became retros and stuff
Hmm.
like that. But it's funny, you should just your page should just be student pastor, coffee connoisseur, and shoe hoarder. That's
Yeah,
those are the three things.
shoe hoarder. I'm actually looking to get rid of one pair of SBs that I don't wear anymore. That a friend said, like when I showed him my collection, he's like, "Dude, I've been wanting those Lagoons for a long time, and I don't ever wear them because they're a little too tight and they like give me a hot spot on my toe." And so I'm considering surprising him with them and just giving them over to him because he's a half size smaller than I am, so they'd probably fit him perfectly. And so I haven't bought as many anymore just because I'm starting to realize like I can't wear them all the time. There's shoes that
Yeah,
go 6 months without me wearing them. So I'm like, maybe I
yeah.
just need to go down a couple pairs and call it good.
It's funny. I never got. I have shoes or had shoes. I kind of stopped buying sneakers, started buying more dress shoes. As you know, I dress up
Yep.
quite a bit, or just a little bit
Sharp
more upscale.
man. Sharp dress
I try to keep
man.
up with you. You're actually.
Like
I like your
ZZ, like
style
ZZ
actually.
Top said. My
Do not
Drew,
give
my
me that
style,
much
my
credit.
style is my style is baggy. That's my style.
Hey, it works for you though. I was watching you preach the other day, and I'm like, he looks pretty. He looks comfortable. He looks comfortable, and he also looks good. It's hard to pull off both of those. I will say
Yeah,
that.
I try.
But but outside of that, man, as we wrap up, like I said, this channel's a lot for high performing individuals, for athletes, for young men. um what's some closing words or closing just some advice you have for any young men, for faith, for life, for their journey? Any last words you want to say to any of our listeners out there?
Man, I would say figure out what you can do for free, or what you would be willing to do for free, and then do that if you can. I heard that piece of advice a long time ago, and that's a big reason why I chose ministry was because that's something I would do for free. But I would also echo what we talked about earlier about community. And don't do life alone. Whether it's a counselor, a group, a bunch of friends, like don't go about it alone because being alone, like loneliness and going at it alone is one of the worst ways and such a quick killer. So just don't do life alone. Have people in your corner that you can go with whenever life gets difficult, because that's what allows us to keep coming back and pushing through when life gets difficult. Because life isn't going to be easy. If you're killing it right now and it's all rainbows and butterflies, kudos to you. But I promise you, it's not always going to be that way. And when life flips it on you, it's going to be really nice to have a support system in those moments.
Mm, thank you. Such strong words from
Yeah,
a
bro.
very humble, down to earth, great individual who's out here making the strides for our youth, being a good father, a great husband, being all those things that, some of us wish we had, and we're going to be that kind of mirror image to those that we get to influence. Juan, how do people contact you if they want to get in contact with you, or, any social media that you have to give to them?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook is just my full name, Juan Carlos Fallas. Instagram, I'm about to look it up because I legitimately don't know my Instagram handle. It's just
Sounding
yeah,
pretty old, man. Sounding
yeah,
old, man.
I know. It's Juan CA 2128. So JuanCa 2128. Yeah, I love connecting with people. Anything I can do to serve people, I'm in it.
Awesome, man. Once again, that's the latest episode of Quality Time. We have our guest, Juan, who stopped through. Thank you so much for all you do at church, for what you do as a dad, as a husband, the kind of influence that you're having on our youth. We greatly appreciate you, man. Thank you for stopping by and being our guest today.
Yeah, bro. Thank you for having me.
We'll catch you guys next time. Stay healthy.